Israel has been waging a war of extermination, really a maximalist expansionist war, a genocide, and a war of destruction against people, against women and children, against civil infrastructures, against houses, against civilian buildings. And they haven't achieved any of their objectives after 1 year. Neither their declared objectives nor their undeclared objectives. When it comes to their declared objectives, they've always said that with regards to Gaza, they want to eliminate Hamas, get their prisoners back, and make sure Gaza does not pose a threat again. With regards to Lebanon, their declared objective was to return the Israeli settlers or squatters back to the north. Their undeclared objectives were, in Gaza, destruction and ethnic cleansing. Likewise with Lebanon, at least when it comes to the south in the beginning. Benjamin Netanyahu had pressure on him being applied from people within the ruling class or the establishment of Israel, and then with normal average Israeli citizens who did not necessarily agree with the way he was waging this whole campaign, neither in Gaza nor in Lebanon. Now, after 1 year, the only thing that Israel has achieved is destruction. They haven't managed to ethnically cleanse the population in Gaza. They couldn't force the people out. They did not affect the social cohesion between the civilian population and the resistance. And likewise with Lebanon, to a level where they are trying to convince the US ambassador in Lebanon to push for a civil war, something that is very unlikely to happen in Lebanon. They've suffered tremendous losses that they do not declare militarily. They've suffered tremendous losses economically, and the biggest hit that this genocide state got was the massive exposure globally. It has been exposed and it has been revealed finally to the masses. Nothing is hidden anymore. Israel thrived in the dark, but now everything is under the light. People are seeing everything. People are looking at everything, and they can no longer brush things under the carpet, and their allies are unable to whitewash their crimes anymore. However, recently, they have been suffering more losses. Firstly, you had the Gaza front, where they had the biggest losses in Gaza, by the way. We had the biggest destruction from Israel in Gaza and the biggest number of casualties in Gaza because Israel suffered most when it comes to their military in Gaza. They had the humiliation on the 7th of October when a group of people who were just notified hours before took down their most advanced division, which is called the Gaza Division, kidnapping troops and taking over territories or liberating territories that were occupied in 1948. Then they went on this massive campaign. We had a year of that. Benjamin Netanyahu decided to escalate now with Lebanon. The losses in Lebanon are again very much censored when it comes to Israel. However, from the many reports that we've been talking about and coming out day after day, we're seeing Israel suffering tremendously in Lebanon. And although they've had very, very large statements coming from Netanyahu himself, from senior figures that, well, this is the revival war, you had people delusional and arrogant to a level where they thought that this is their time now. You had delusional people from other countries too, thinking that's it, the Israeli era is here now. You can say goodbye to anyone resisting Israel or calling for the rights of their people. However, everything is turning upside down. Firstly, we had Yoav Gallant a couple of days ago, and I spoke about this yesterday, saying that we need to make compromises. We need to have some concessions, and they're going to have to be difficult. You know, not everything can be achieved militarily. We can't achieve everything by force. And again, the genocide entity does not say that unless they are suffering tremendous losses. That's the first thing. Secondly, we had one of their biggest racists Smotrich, the finance minister, the man who is pushing for more and more genocide, crying on live television a couple of days ago, saying that, we're losing so many people, we're losing the creme de la creme of our genocide society, and, so many people are dying, crying on live television. Why are they doing that? I mean, we can't assume for 1 second that these people are genuine. We're seeing an act in front of us, and this act is there to justify something or prepare the public opinion for something that is coming. Now we have a statement coming from the Lebanese Prime Minister. The Lebanese Prime Minister, who is heavily involved in the talks to de-escalate and try and reach a ceasefire, said that we are looking to reach towards a ceasefire. We can reach a ceasefire within hours or days. That's the Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati. And we also had a hint from the new Secretary General of HIZBULLAH, Naim Qasim, saying that this war is not going to last forever. Of course, he had many things to say in his first speech as a Secretary General, including, of course, the path that Hezbollah is taking, how they are continuing to hit Israel, and that they will never leave the path of the resistance, and that the resistance will end up victorious. But he hinted in a confident manner that the war will end at some point, and everything will be rebuilt, and the people will go back to their homes, because Israel is on a destruction campaign in South Lebanon as well. Now, how is that linked to what's happening on the ground, and how is that linked to the political developments when it comes to the biggest supporter of this genocidal entity, the United States administration? Firstly, when it comes to the ground, the losses are becoming intolerable. There's an argument that by the previous parameters of Israel, the war has been intolerable a very long time ago. However, Benjamin Netanyahu insisted on continuing despite having extremely difficult conditions and despite suffering tremendous losses when it comes to the army, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the society, and when it comes to Israel's tarnished image globally, to a level where people are no longer recognizing its right to exist as an entity following such heinous crimes being committed in the last year. So when it comes to the ground, they are suffering tremendously. And now it reached a level where they told themselves, we are literally unable to continue anymore. If they have deployed 5 divisions on the borders with Lebanon, and they are unable to proceed, they are unable to have any significant progress, and they are getting such significant blows from the Lebanese resistance, how can they continue? And in Gaza, they are implementing what's labeled as the General's Plan in North Gaza, which is to ethnically cleanse all of the northern Gazan population, including through starvation and attacking hospitals, attacking every single lifeline, starving the people to death, and terrorizing them out of their homes by taking down buildings with the people inside them, women and children, again, we're talking about. They are failing. So what does that say? That says that Israel's philosophy, and again, Israel does that as a philosophy, targeting women and children, because this is what they target. They don't target the fight, they hardly target people who fight them. The vast majority of the people they target are innocent civilians, and that's part of their philosophy. That's part of the mentality that they fight with, because from their perspective, we don't want to let these people live. We want to kill their women and children, and we want to hurt them as much as possible, even through killing innocent civilians. And we're talking about, in the case of Gaza, an infanticide. 17,000 children, 17,000 children, thousands of which under the age of 1. Talking about infants and newborns. And again, we all saw the images. Now, if they are failing with this approach towards the war, when their opponents, on the other hand, the Islamic resistance in Lebanon and the Palestinian resistance movements, who are primarily targeting the genocide forces and military bases and security bases, what are they going to achieve and when are they going to achieve it? They have exhausted every single method to try and force these people to kneel down through these crimes that are beyond anyone's imagination, beyond any horror scene that anyone has seen in his life, being live streams on a day-to-day basis. How are they gonna continue? Well, they cannot. That's the thing. So you can be as arrogant as you want, you can get as much money and weapons from the United States as you want, but you cannot continue this forever. That is from the things that are happening on the ground. So that's in relation to the developments on the fronts. And we were only talking about Gaza and Lebanon. We haven't spoken about the economic devastation after the sanctions being imposed by Yemen. We haven't spoken about the specific targetings of the Iraqi resistance with their almost daily drones. And we haven't spoken about Iran with its tremendously large specific blows on the genocide forces bases and the threat, the looming threat of a response coming from Iran. And I'll get to that after I talk about the United States link. There have been numerous reports that there will be no ceasefire up until we get a result of the US elections. Many people said that Benjamin Netanyahu, he had to deal with Trump. He's expecting Trump to come in. Again, not assuming that Trump would come in or anything, but he's assuming he would come to power. And he had an agreement with him, do not do anything up until I come into power. Now, that might happen, but that also might not happen, because there could have been other agreements between the United States administration and Israel to stop this completely. And the United States can, if it wants to, force Israel to stop. They have been the ones enabling Israel primarily throughout this whole period. The United States administration, with their unconditional support for Israel militarily and financially. Without the United States administration, there will be no Israel in the region. Of course, there are other participants, the people who support Israel, the Genocide Coalition, some in the Arab states who, from the background, might support and not show it, and some people who actually take official positions when it comes to that. So we have these two indications. Firstly, the things on the fronts, primarily the Lebanese and the Palestinian, and the massive losses that Israel is suffering now. And then you have the United States elections as well. And this has been a very big part of the election campaign for all candidates in the United States. The only thing that they've spoken about when it comes to foreign policy is primarily the military intervention and the wars that the United States is supporting abroad, both in Ukraine and in Israel. The United States enabling these two regimes, the Zelensky regime and the Netanyahu regime, from continuing without any scrutiny, without any sort of limits, without any boundaries, no nothing, regardless of the levels of crimes that they are committing and regardless of the levels of recklessness they reach and their threat on not only regional but global security as well. However, again, you still might have certain figures that have certain influence who are able to take the tensions down, because if they are unable to take the tensions down and contain what's happening abroad, then eventually we will be looking at a global war. There are arguments that we're already in World War III, but it's on kind of low heat now. It's just about time. It's just a matter of time up until it escalates further. And now we're only talking about the big tensions in Eastern Europe that could very likely reach Western Europe at some point. And of course, Palestine and the situation in Gaza and Lebanon, West Asia. And we haven't spoken about China. We haven't spoken about China and Taiwan. The United States put that on hold for a bit up until they try and de-escalate the situations here. But if they continue down this path of recklessness, things will get out of control, and the global human race will be suffering eventually, and that will not be good for anyone. It wouldn't be good for the United States. It wouldn't be good for anyone. Of course, there are people who are suffering more than others, but if you talk about a continuation of the same path when it comes to United States official foreign policy, that's the main thing that has to have elements of change so we can see a reduction. And from the latest signs, and I am again not trying to be hopeful, I try as much as possible not to be pessimistic or optimistic and just to analyze. But from the recent reports that we're having, it appears to be that there are certain indications that we might reach a ceasefire, primarily to begin with in Lebanon, but that will also undoubtedly include Gaza, because although Hezbollah now prioritize having a ceasefire in Lebanon, Hezbollah have not cut the tie with Gaza, and the fact that they have started this when it comes to Gaza. As a matter of fact, today in his speech, Sheikh Naim Qasim, the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, he actually addressed the fact that people are asking the Lebanese resistance, was it a right decision for you to tie yourself with Gaza and to go on to support Gaza? And he said that that's a question that should not be asked. The question that should be asked is, why are the others not supporting Gaza? Not why we are supporting Gaza. Why are the others not supporting Gaza? That is the question that should be asked. So again, indicating that it's a principle when it comes to Hezbollah, it's a principle when it comes to Iran, it's a principle when it comes to the majority of the resistance fronts, if not all of them, to support the Palestinian cause, although they pay heavy prices, including internal heavy prices in the form of Iran as a country. You're talking about sanctions, you're talking about constant threats of war, terror activities supported by Western proxies in these territories, alongside other parts of the region. So if we are going to see something in Lebanon, we will most likely see something in Gaza. Now you might ask, well, how can Israel, firstly, if they do go ahead on this to this ceasefire, how are they gonna package this to the Israeli public? Well, firstly, I spoke about the indications of coming from Gallant and Smotrich, and these are two very powerful figures in the Netanyahu government. And again, if someone like Smotrich agrees to a ceasefire, then the coalition is saved. Benjamin Netanyahu is saved. So we previously said that Netanyahu won't go on a ceasefire unless he protects his future. If the hardliners in his government guarantee that they will support a certain ceasefire based on the current conditions, then he will continue and remain in power. So there is no worry, and he will not be going to court nor nothing, because so long as he's in power, he can still have a veto per se when it comes to the Israeli courts, and he will still push for the reform that he will most likely get away with, because he hasn't stopped, despite record numbers of Israelis protesting against his war, and to basically stop it and reach a ceasefire. Also, well, he has something to package it with. So not only are Gallant and Smotrich saying that, we had reports that the IDF are now saying we need to end the war. Now that's it, because they cannot. They have no people to fight. Like, reservists gone, they don't want to serve. Tens of thousands are killed. Tens of thousands are wounded. Hundreds of thousands are with PTSD. What are they going to do? They can't continue this forever. So give them whatever they want in terms of weapons. If there's no one to die in this death cult, death machine, if there's no cannon fodder, right? The people, then they cannot continue. Also, he has a package. Like, he can say, well, look, I killed 50,000 Palestinians at least. and I killed thousands of Lebanese, and I destroyed all of Gaza, and I destroyed all South Lebanon, and I killed Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and I killed Yahya Sinwar, and I hit Iran, and I targeted their military capabilities, and I hit their long-range missiles, and I targeted them. He has something to sell the Israeli public. So it's not like he can come up to the Israeli public and say, oh guys, hey, we failed and we submit, we give in to the resistance now, and we're no longer going to continue fighting. No, he will sell it as a great accomplishment, a massive accomplishment, and he will tell the people, look how much destruction, look how many people I killed. We have established now as a force, we established as a tremendous force in the Middle East. We killed the senior figures, and they cannot pose a threat again. And that's something, for those of you who don't know and haven't monitored previous wars, Israel always does that after certain escalation. So after their wars with Gaza, for example, in 2009, 2012, 2014, they always used to come out and say, oh, we targeted Hamas's long-range missile capabilities. They are not posing a threat now. Likewise with Hezbollah in 2006, oh, we took down 70% of their missile capabilities. They'll come up with any numbers because they've been coming up now since the 7th of October as lies, not like they really establish facts or anything. So they'll tell the people, for example, Hamas, they're no longer able to conduct the 7th of October. Hezbollah, we completely destroyed their leadership structure. Look at the pager attacks. Look at everything we've done. Look at how many missiles we took down, although they're being attacked every day. And likewise with Gaza, again, although they are targeted every single day in Gaza, but of course they don't talk about it to hide it from their own population with the mainstream media propaganda, so that when it comes to a stage of a ceasefire, they can tell the population, well, look, they're not conducting anything. They're hardly resisting. We dismantled all of their brigades. And now they're even saying we dismantled Hamas as a military structure. What does that indicate? That indicates that they are willing to accept Hamas remaining in Gaza as a non-military structure. So prepare for that. Prepare for Hamas to remain in Gaza after this ends, and for Israel to potentially accept that, assuming that we are reaching a ceasefire. Again, nothing is guaranteed. All of this could be blown by the wind, right? Because you're talking about a very large escalation that hasn't happened before to this level, to this extent, and we're talking about a very intense period. Now, if we do go ahead to a ceasefire, what does that mean? Because many people will come up and say, how comes you have a ceasefire with all of these sacrifices? Everything needs to continue up until everything is either dismantled from the Israeli side. Again, the opposite maximalist approach coming from the side looking to end the genocide entity. And again, these ideas and thoughts can be established on true and genuinely correct notions and wills. Why? Because we all want the regime of apartheid to end, and a lot of people are calling for implementation of equality between the Jordan River to the sea. As absurd as it may sound now, but that is the only long-term solution. An equal state, equal rights between the Jordan River to the sea, everyone living in there, with, of course, historical and contemporary rights for the Palestinian people. Now, what does that mean? That means, firstly, that this has been the biggest defeat ever in Israeli history. Why? I'll tell you why. If we go back, and if we do have a ceasefire, we would assume it would end in this manner, because the Palestinian resistance led by Hamas, leading the negotiations on behalf of the 13 resistance movements in Gaza, Hamas, the PIJ, PFLP, all of the other movements, they're saying, end the war, withdraw from all of Gaza, allow people to go back everywhere, allow all required aid and necessities for Gaza, and rebuild Gaza. All of that says what? The Palestinian resistance reestablishes itself inside of Gaza, Israel can sell it or package it in any way they want. Likewise with Lebanon. The talks that they're having with Lebanon is an implementation of 1701 again. Hezbollah will not go north of the Litani River. They can go up officially 5 kilometers and the Lebanese army will be deployed back again. Again, what does that mean? We're back to the same position they were in before. What does that mean again? A massive Israeli failure. Why an Israeli failure? Because it did not achieve the first and most important and most repeated objective of the war. He's not saying it as much now, but he used to say it every single day in the beginning. Eliminating the Hamas in Gaza. He would succumb and bite the bullet and swallow, and he will make everyone swallow the pill that Hamas is still a force in Gaza and they will have freedom to continue. We cannot eliminate them. And many people inside of Israel, in the Israel establishment, have been preparing the public opinion for that. We've had people saying for months now that Hamas is an idea, you cannot defeat them. People in the US administration told Israel that. We wouldn't necessarily have a problem with certain figures in Hamas remaining as part of another government. Hamas themselves said we are fine to merge within other movements, but we will not agree to give up our weapons, nor our ideas, nor recognize the state of Israel. And when it comes to Lebanon, likewise, you're talking about Hezbollah remaining there, Hezbollah still in power, everything goes back to its place. So when it comes to Gaza and Lebanon, you're talking about rebuilding, people recuperating, getting everything back to normal, and continuing the preparation. When it comes to Israel, what do we have? We have a new reality. That new reality is you are living next to certain movements or entities next to you that are able to conduct operations such as the 7th of October in any given moment. What reassurances does that give the Israeli settlers surrounding Gaza? What reassurances does that give to the settlers in North Israel? Nothing. So far, and Israel had the courage to release certain stats in recent weeks, following a poll they had with the residents of the northern parts affected or most heavily affected, because now it's reaching Haifa and Tel Aviv, right? Will you go back? 80% said no. And these figures are similar to the areas surrounding Gaza. The Zionist Federation had another poll with Israelis abroad fleeing the war. How many of you will be returning back to Israel? 80% again said no. What does that all tell you? That the people who are supposed to be the people defending the existence of this entity that calls itself a Jewish state, the Zionist entity, no longer have faith in this entity as it exists. And the people who are remaining there will be people who are constantly fighting, people fighting over the image of the country that they live in. We have people who want to have some sort of a settlement with the people around them, have some sort of a reassurance for the future. And we have other people who are only looking to impose a larger entity with a regime of supremacy, with an ethnocracy, an ethno-supremacist state, a racist state, an apartheid state that favors one human being over the other. And now they started to include the other part of the Israeli society, well, as the enemies. Like we've had many people in government, closest people to Netanyahu, calling the Israeli population protesting against the war, whether or not they have a problem with the concept of genocide, because you have other minorities against the genocide in Israel and who refuse to serve in the army for moral purposes. But in general, opposing Netanyahu, and Lord knows we have many people opposing Netanyahu in Israel, they have a different vision, and the people who support Netanyahu are calling them Hamas members. So you're talking about civil war that's a cold civil war. The only thing different about the civil war is we haven't had people really raising arms against each other so far. If we have a ceasefire, if the situation in Gaza settles, if the situation in Lebanon settles, there will be a heightened situation of tensions inside of Israel, and the past year would keep the Palestinian cause in the headlines for many more years to come. So it's very unlikely that the topic, if we do reach a ceasefire, will all of a sudden disappear. Israel will never be recuperating from what it's done in the past year, and Israel will not be recovering from what it's done in the past year and what it faced. And Israel is unable and will not be able to hide what it's done in the past year. Now, when it comes to such implementation, firstly, the leverage of Iran, and in my opinion, there is leverage, although we heard certain talks that Iran might be attacking Israel within 2 weeks. Some people said within a matter of days they can be attacking Israel. I believe that Iran might be using, or is very likely using, their leverage when it comes to the fact that they haven't responded to Israel yet, to apply pressure on everyone concerned, on the United States administration, on Israel. We haven't attacked them so far. You told us in July, don't attack them yet, we're on the way for a ceasefire. We haven't. You lied, or we knew you were lying, but we wanted to show the whole population. And later we did attack Israel, and look how we attacked them. You haven't had the capability to stop our attacks. We will have something far more severe next time, and there is a limited time to do that. How much? Who knows? However, Iran could be using that as leverage. Of course, so far, nothing is confirmed. Again, all of this talk about a ceasefire could be completely nothing, and we could continue and see escalation after escalation. However, the fact of the matter is, Israel suffered the biggest losses they have ever suffered in their history, and they can try and censor this as much as they like. The situation when it comes to Israel at a state level, at an existential level, at a legitimacy level, is unheard of. We have never seen Israel in such a state before, let alone the fact that they are suffering tremendously when it comes to their military and their economy, their politics, and at a societal level. The next few days will probably reveal some new information when it comes to this prospect. We will either see a continuation of the tone, and we are hearing again more talks coming from the Palestinian side about things to do with the negotiations, meaning that there are intense attempts in the background. Again, not to guarantee that it will or won't happen, but the next few days and the reports that we will be hearing in the next few days, both from the Zionist side and from the Palestinian and Lebanese sides as well, because they're both equally as important at the moment, will indicate where things are going.